Hey guys, thanks for joining me here today. I'm once again with Scott Smith and Canadian Wilderness Outfitters. We're on the north end of the Duck Mountains, and in the first video we talked quite a bit about bear biology and things like that. And in this video we're going to talk more about behaviors and about baiting and the strategies, and somewhat about how to hunt these bigger bears. Also, how it's different here than it is where I hunt in Minnesota and other states that I've hunted, where there's a lot of hunting pressure, where, you know, up here you can drive into a bait with a quad, maybe spook a bear off the bait and put a guy in a stand, and 15 minutes later that bear comes back. Where I don't even drive to the baits with a quad where I guide, because if you spook a bear off the bait, whether you're walking in or a quad, you might not see that bear again. He might just go nocturnal on you. So that's one good thing about what you got here. You've got more bears here. But let's talk about the baiting. And you're using barrels. Tell us about a little bit about your strategy about the barrels. And then also, we had a discussion a couple days ago about being consistent and adding new scents and stuff like that. Let's go into that too.
Okay, yeah. I guess right off the bat, everything seems connected. Like you hit so many good points there. And you brought up in, I know, one of your last articles I was reading about baiting and trying to make bears do things and
manipulating
and bear manipulation. I think that thought process comes from somewhere people observe certain things that happen with maybe lower amounts of bait. You know, like when you're hand baiting 5-gallon buckets of bait and you're working hard, like you gotta leave work or you gotta drive distances and you got just enough bait you put out, and then you observe something that happens. There's lessons learned by the hunter or the baiter in relation to how the bear reacts to the amount of bait. Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of assumptions that come out of that amount of bait and the amount of time that they do baiting. After a while, a lot of people determine, as well as myself years back, that it would be really important to go every day and make sure you have bait. I think that's where it starts, when you become consistent. You start promoting consistency. And I don't know if it's your saying or my saying, but consistency kills bears. I mean,
it's your saying, but it's 100% exactly like what I've been saying for years, is don't try to manipulate bears by forcing them to do something they don't want to do, and don't be changing things up, you know. Don't run out of one kind of bait and just completely switch to another kind of bait, or don't be using a certain kind of lure and then you go out there on opening day and you're sitting in the stand and you do a honey burn and all the bears around are going, wait a minute, what's that?
Yeah, and it can be negative, right? Like whether it be the amount of time that you're doing those specific things or changing things up or not being focused on the actual hunt. I mean, you give a guy who's trying to achieve, you know, a kill in the end, and he's got a way to think that it's going to be better to, you know, take the time to do a honey burn or something of that. Like everything has got to be done kind of with purpose, right? To understand if it's even making an effect or not. So that's something where we learn a lot here in outfitting, doing as many baits as we do. I mean, we learn a lot to where we're very fortunate, because we're taking the amount of hunters that we are and running the amount of baits that we are, and we're doing things so that we can maintain baits. And we definitely find it seems more important to keep baits going versus running out of bait. I mean, you think of it like this, like a bear comes to a bait, there's food there, it is in their sight to return to that the next night. I mean, that's why it is successful. Talking about baiting, again, as outfitters, we come across the different baits. We try all different types of things and see what works. Using hand baiting, the amount of bait seems to matter. If we can keep from going there every day, we would. And that's the thing, is you still want to keep the amount of bait there for the bears. Now when you go and you put bait in a spot and it's working, and if you go change that up and you recognize negative results, and I say negative results meaning bears stop either hitting the bait or visiting your bait site, and that can be observed quite quickly when you're sitting on bait and the animals just start showing up because you made some type of change to your bait. Then lessons are learned. One of the things years back, outfitters used to exclusively, they would always start baits with molasses, and molasses is a bait that even today people use. They love it, whether it's beet pulp molasses or sugarcane type molasses. I don't know, I've seen negative results using molasses when introduced after I've been using a primary bait for weeks on end, and I haven't had any molasses on there, and now I just go and I dump molasses on a bait, and all of a sudden the bait shuts down, and people say, no, that's impossible. I'm a guide for X amount of years and I'm always using molasses, and I'm saying that's not the point. Try not using the molasses, and then introduce that into the equation after 4 weeks of using another bait, and then see how it reacts, see how that bait reacts. And I'm not saying that I wouldn't even suggest that you would want to do that, because I've seen such negative results that it's scary. There's other things that we've had issues with where hunters hunting with us, and every once in a while you have a fellow hunting with us and he's not seeing animals, and we're wondering, okay, what is it? Is it his specific smell? Is it something he's doing? And it probably is. If he could be observed with a guide after a couple days, if something is happening where he's not seeing animals, we as outfitter and guides, like, we're interested in what's going on. Is it something that he's doing? Is he is this because the bait without him on it would still be working? The more bears that collect on a bait, and here we have multiple animals on a bait, the more animals that come in, it seems it lessens the amount of human interaction with, or what would perceive as negative interaction. It seems the less bears you have with human interaction, it seems like that makes a difference in how they react to humans, right? Like, we got so many bears here, they have to react with all each other, that when a human comes into the equation, it's kind of like, no big deal.
Well, and that person that's not seeing bears,
Yeah.
and you don't know if he's swatting mosquitoes or if he used apple cover scent and didn't tell anybody.
Or didn't tell us,
And
right?
all of a sudden there's this apple smell at the bait
Yes.
that has never had apple smell.
Yes, it's
And
strong,
I
right?
really apologize for this lighting. We're really just winging it here. This is very informal, but the sun is
Look,
getting...
you're the chosen one with the light on you.
Yeah, it's like, it's not a halo. The light's getting down into the window there, but we're gonna keep going here. So the key is, and I'll just give you my example how I learned this and really screwed it up. And one of the first bear hunts that I went on, being an outdoor writer, I have companies that send me stuff a lot. Well, the company that makes, it was called a Bear Bomb, and it's a canister. It had all these different flavors and stuff like that, and you push the thing down, it's like you're trying to kill spiders in your basement or something,
Right.
and you push the thing down and it sprays. And they sent me some of this and said, yeah, you're going on a bear hunt, give this a try, see how you like it. So I go out there and I set one on the barrel and I spray it, and I didn't see any bears. And it was like, the outfitter's like, holy smokes, there's been bears on that bait every single day.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to figure out that the common denominator is that when I sprayed off that bottle, the bears didn't come. And it was just because comfort and as you say, consistency kills bears.
Yeah.
It's trying to manipulate, it's changing things up. And
if you're seeing negative results, meaning bears not coming to baits, we have to think that maybe we're doing something wrong. I mean, there's something there, right? And then if you spend another night on that bait, you may see the situation advance to something better, where the bears then show themselves. And there's a bit of that comes in it too, whether we're dealing with like a classic conditioning situation where you're having the bears come in and they recognize your scent there. And this opens up a whole new can of worms, right? Like talking about the animals knowing you're there versus not knowing you're there at that specific time. Yes, it matters.
So I just had to change cameras because our battery went dead. That's why it looks a little different. Go ahead and talk about if the bears, if they know you're there or not.
Yeah. Again, it's opening up a can of worms. Like an animal like the bear, who does everything in life by his nose first. I mean, I can say that with bears that we've had that literally were blind, had no eyes, come into a bait, and they were just using their nose and their other senses to live. Coming into a bait and being in this tight bush that we have here, where you may have only a 20 or 30 yard window of a visual opportunity to see these animals, and vice versa, them seeing us. We got to remember, like, they found this bait somehow, and they found it by their nose or following the tracks of other bears and the smells and the social habits of bears. We're asking a lot of the bear coming into a bait to not know that you are there. I know I think the easiest way to explain is, like, that bush is tight and the bears are coming into that bait, but we're expecting them not to smell us. Now, we as outfitters recognize that we need to get a bow hunter or even a rifle hunter in close for a kill on these baits. So at what point do we recognize that some of these bears, if not the majority of them, do recognize that there's the human element there? They definitely know that they're sent from the person who put bait into the buckets that we use for baiting to hold the bait. They can smell that. They may react to that. They may react to other bears on the bait, the smells around it. But then you have the element of the hunter actually in a tree stand at that time. And I guess there's two polar opposite ways of looking at it. If you're in the stand and the bear does smell you, he could run or he wouldn't run, right? Like, he would react or he doesn't react, right? Well, the psyche of the black bear is they have this ability to soak it up and deal with human scent. Now, how they deal with it is they may be comfortable to know exactly where that possible scent may be of another bear coming in, or maybe human in a tree. I would say reacting negatively would be if the bear doesn't come into the bait, and we promote for our hunters to make a harvest at the bait. We don't want to have someone shooting at a bear lurking out in the bush to where they may not be able to positively identify the sex of the bear. You know, the last thing we'd want is someone harvesting, you know, a sow and cubs or something. So we want them to harvest a bear at the bait. So with that being said, we gotta do our work to get the bear at the bait. So some really important points here, and I know in Manitoba the outfitters are really key to understand that there's hunting the bear a couple different ways. You can hunt them like you would whitetail, to where there's no conditioning. It's about the person, like, not being there. So, that's one way of doing it. And the other way is a conditioning situation. Now, I tend to worry about the consistencies of a conditioning situation. You said in one of your videos before where a guy promoted for his hunters to have, like, a t-shirt and put it up in the tree stand.
He asked them to send them a t-shirt in the mail.
And I remember that. Yeah, and I think looking at that, it's very understandable how a guy can come to that and that decision. But I'm going to say that when you're at that level to where you're looking at a conditioning situation that way, to where you're trying to positively promote conditioning that way, you're generally doing it with, how can I say, your general harvest may be sows. They're spending more time around the bait.
Younger bears and sows.
Younger bears and sows, and primarily sows, because they are spending more time at the bait and they condition more easily than boars that are more rangy. They're not around every day, where the consistency of coming into a stand at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and dropping off that 5-gallon bucket of bait, and then the bear that comes in right away after that may be a bear that you actually pushed off, but comes in right away within 15 minutes in your harvest. It's a very high probability that bear's a saddle, because she's spending the time and she's conditioned that hunter who's been baiting that way. So there's where conditioning necessarily isn't in your favor if you're not interested in harvesting a dry, and I say a sow, but what I mean is a dry sow. And when you're looking for bigger animals, more meat, bigger size, there's different ways of looking at conditioning. So
the other thing is, you're asking a bear to not be able to tell the difference between a t-shirt and an actual human.
And that, like the human actually being on the bait at that time.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So
and that's a big stretch.
It is, because they, like, I mean, you're sitting in the stand and your scent in your mouth and the scent from your body, it's there. The animal is doing things. I've seen bears react to that where they're not comfortable. And primarily, and I think the key to it is, when that bear's at the bait, if your wind's blowing at that bear at that bait at that time that he's decided to come in, lots of times they won't settle in, and that becomes very counterproductive to making a good shot. And you'll find a lot of your outfitters will use different strategies. They'll have 2 different stand setups. Us personally, we generally have our primary stand situation to where the wind isn't blowing over the bait with the prevailing wind. So the prevailing wind here in this area is like a southwest wind, and our stand location more northerly, maybe northeasterly. I mean, there may be a little bit of manipulation with land and how they come in to a bait, but in all reality, you think of it as a big circle. You know, if you're on a flat piece of land and there's a big circle that's going to happen by the bears to come downwind of that bait, which I believe many of them do. They're circling that bait to where you're not even seeing them before they get comfortable to come in. And this is on a daily deal. If you could be elevated looking down at what's going on at a bait site, there is bears coming in from different directions, circling. There's a whole satellite situation going on of animals here, because if they come just plowing into that bait, they might run into the rogue male who's decided that that's his bait, and there may be a fight. And that type of confrontation isn't necessarily what every bear wants to come in contact with, right? So it's very important that they have that respect for each other. And then when the human element is in there, it means something, but it definitely seems to mean less if the human element is in there and they do get some touch of wind. It seems like it means less if it's not blowing over the bait at the time that they're actually trying to eat the bait.
I've kind of got a theory about why that is, and 100% agree with everything you say. But a lot of times I think these bears, they're checking, they're not just circling downwind to see if there's somebody there. They want to know.
That's right. Yeah. It's not about a hunter who drove up in a Toyota from Michigan. Like, they have no knowledge of what that even really means, right? It's not about the hunter relationship. If anything, they're the hunter coming into
their area.
their area, and we're just an anomaly to what everything else is going on.
And even if they circle downwind, wind is never like in a straight line for long periods of time, especially in thick cover. It's swirling and stuff like that. Yeah. So they get up, they're like, wait, I think I just smelled a human. And then it's gone for a second. Yeah. They go back and forth a little bit. Oh, there it is again, and it's gone.
Yeah.
But if that bait, if the wind is blowing right over the bait, and the bear eventually commits to the bait, which they typically do, even if they smell you a little bit, get a whiff or two, then they gotta sit there and get comfortable at the bait with your wind, and that's where you gotta.
It seems like anytime somebody observes, and mostly it's a mature animal, and it's usually it's a bow hunter, and he says, you know, the bear came in, but he just sat outside the bait, like he just wouldn't come into that bait, and he was actually sitting and acting like he wasn't looking at me, and every once in a while he'd look my way, and I'd pull up my binoculars, and I'd look, and I could see him, you know, looked like his eye was looking right at me, you know, and I said, you know, maybe he probably was, and he wasn't comfortable coming in and eating that bait with that constant slap of human scent that's coming right from the source, hitting him, you know, and I mean, that's the way we perceive it. But again, I probably got to stress that this is something that we notice, like in this area, higher population of bears, the bears take more chances. Nocturnal for them means that they're not going to get into the bait as readily, so I think more daytime activity is actually enhanced. Like we have this evening where 85% of the bears are coming in during the evening. All this is a natural manipulation on their part on how they're going to come in and hit the bait. So lower population in certain states where you and I have hunted, and we found that yeah, they have to react accordingly. And then the human element may mean more. You know, like one or two bears coming to a bait, and now there's a human smell. It might be enough to shut one down and say, you know, I'm just not going to deal with this and move on.
Yeah. But I had a perfect example on my first night here when I had a big bear come in, and the wind hadn't been blowing towards the bait all night, but then the wind just died down, and he came in. I think end of legal shooting light was right around 10 o'clock, and he came in at 9:17, and it was calm. But then when he got to the bait, then all of a sudden there was wind on the back of my neck, and it was some kind of it was a thermal, and it went right to him, and he's got his face in this bait, and all of a sudden it's like boom, he smelled that, and then you know he's doing this with his nose, and he goes back to eating, and then all of a sudden there goes that thermal again, and it was the fourth time. I mean, it was just like, you know what, he didn't know I was there. He just could smell human scent.
Time to go.
And it was just, and after it happened the fourth time, he just said, you know what, that's enough, and he left. And that was a perfect example of a situation where if the wind had been from any other direction, that bear would have fed for half an hour or more there instead of
probably
10 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's important to understand, I guess, when we talk about the consistency of things, that's how we learn. So, I mean, you sat on that stand, there's really no way that you could react to change anything up when you're committed, the animal's there. I mean, it's going to happen. You're going to get the wind, they're going to react accordingly. It's just, you know, anything a person can do to maintain some type of consistency with their hunting. They're going to be able to observe how it affects their hunting, right? Like, I mean, that's the best way. It's kind of grassroots way of learning. For here, as guides and outfitters, we do a lot of that work for you. We're more or less the authority on how we're going to help you get an animal, and we make those decisions ahead of time, how we're going to do stand placement, set up the baits accordingly, and try to put all the odds in a person's favor, so that there's not any of the last minute guessing to come into place. I mean, we're always trying to fine tune things, but you know, keeping bait there as much as possible, very important.
You're pretty much like I am, that you just really don't want to run out of bait. You
just don't, and the reason is we see problems. Like, we see where it took a bunch of bears to knock that bait down and get rid of, like, take it away, and now you go in there, the bait's empty, and then you gotta ask yourself, it's empty not just because you've come in there, but it's empty for how long? How many days have other bears returned and they didn't get something? They didn't get that taste. Because, you know, as I do, the bear doesn't come in and just gorge himself generally on a spring hunt to where he eats more than 5 pounds of bait. Like, he's in there eating an amount, he's good, he goes, or she goes. And some eat more than others, but for the most part, they're getting an amount as if they have the idea that they can always move on and come back. when that's empty, again, how many times did that animal or other animals return and not find? And then what's their psyche then? Like, do they then move on to another spot? Because I'm thinking so. So that's where the consistency is in place to maintain
in a
animals.
situation like where I've hunted a lot in many states where there's a lot of people baiting, you know, there's in most of the places that I hunt, within a mile or two, somebody else has got a bait.
Yes.
And if you're trying to manipulate bears by cutting back on bait, or, you know, trying to use this idea that if they come in and find that the bait's gone, they're going to come in earlier the next day to try to be the first one there.
But they're
It's not.
they're going to lose.
You're going to lose them. You're going to lose the
You're
bear.
going to lose out because somebody else has got a bait down the road to be, you know, to feed them, right? And might have a higher quality bait, and the bear wants to visit that one over it, or maybe feels more comfortable at that other bait. You know, there's going to be reasons there to where you're going to have to compete, right? So I know here a little different. It's not a competition situation that way, where we're competing with other hunters and their baits, or even a mass crop in the spring. You know, there's not that competition. But what we have here when it comes to competition is the other bears. So again, we're not trying to keep bears fed. We're trying to give them bait that they'll return to.
It's a good option for them.
It's a good option for them. They come, but that option's got to be there. If it's not there, it's going to throw some inconsistencies in there that you're not going to be able to capitalize on the consistent part of baiting, right? So
I promised them that we're going to talk about hunting mornings versus evening, but before we do that, we had a discussion about if the bear, like if he knows you're there, he sees you in the stand, if you're not making any jerky movements to spook him or anything like that. We had a discussion where we both agree. Talk about the issue of being up a tree.
Yeah, it's a good point. Looking at years back, where when we first heard of people elevated stand hunting in some of the provinces, they weren't very high in trees. I think that whole evolution of stand hunting has kind of went again with the with whitetail hunting, making the correlation that somehow you should be higher. Archery hunters worrying about certain things being at a certain height with the shot angle for bears. So there's been a lot of changes in height, but one thing's for sure, being elevated in a tree seems to be an advantage that maybe a lot of people haven't really recognized. But like we've talked, that there's this idea that possibly the bear sees the person in the stand as if like it's a subordinate position, right? Because every bear when it was younger, as a cub, learned
got chased up a tree 100 times.
Exactly, like the safety of the tree. So there's the safety of the tree. That's what they do. We even see younger bears that aren't cubs, that, you know, they're young adult cubs, and you know, if I chase them off because they're coming into a bait and I'm trying to service a bait, or I'm trying to skin a bear in a bush and I'm chasing a bear, and I chase a bear off and it runs to the bottom of a tree and it wants to go up a tree partial ways, that bear is considering going up that tree to be safe. Yeah. So what do you recognize when...
I'm saying that, so the bear that's down there, and he's a big bear, and for the first 2-3 years of his life, he constantly got chased up a tree.
Constantly. Okay. So he knows what that's about.
Right. Yeah. And now he's the one doing the chasing.
Now he's doing the chasing.
And he looks up and he goes, you just stay where you are and we'll all be fine.
We'll all be good. You just stay there, I put you there, right?
Yeah, like I put you there.
And if you think of that, like when you're looking at these bears on bait, like when I see your videos and I'm watching your videos, Bernie, and I'm thinking, there's that bear giving that look, you know, and he's just like, yeah, I put you there.
Yeah, you know? I'm in charge here.
I'm in charge. I put you there.
Okay, so the sun's going down here. we got to finish one more question.
Yes.
So we talked about hunting mornings versus hunting evenings.
Yes.
You said 85%.
Yeah.
I've got a theory on mornings that makes it more difficult. I'll tell my idea, and then you tell me, because I don't know if you hunt. I've never hunted a morning when I've been in your camp, but
Yeah.
so here's the thing: when you go in to hunt, if you go in the morning, there's oftentimes bears are there right at daylight. So if you go in right before daylight or right at daylight, there's a pretty good chance you could spook that bear off the bait,
Yeah.
and he's going to go to a bedding area.
That's right.
I mean, he's not. If you spook a bear off at 4 o'clock and get in the stand, and it's not dark till 10,
He's got time to
pretty
come
good
back.
chance he's going to come
He
back.
could,
But if you
right.
spook him off in the morning, you're probably not going to see him till evening.
And you generally don't. That's the thing. Like unless it's that like resident sow on the bait or what. Like we've had them coming right back in 15 minutes later after spooking them off. But yeah, there is that in the morning for sure. You know, for us outfitters, for the most part, we notice that most clients are comfortable with a 5 to 5.5 hour sit, and then after that, you know, there's the issues of moving and back and everything. So we're trying to put all the best odds in someone's favor, so we put them when we believe, from all our intel and even now with cameras, that there is more movement in the evening as things are settling down, the wind goes down, more predictable wind patterns for the bears to come in and survey a bait. So we'll hunt the evening. I mean, you're probably going to see more animals. Can you kill a bear in the morning? Absolutely. You can kill big mature bears in the morning as you can in the evening. It's a matter of, and I believe if you want to hunt, go for it. Like that's what it's all about. But you generally find, as we do, you know, we'd have people say, you know, I want to sit all day. I'm in it to win it. And yeah, after about one day of that, and the person says, you know, I didn't see anything all morning, but come about 4:30 in the afternoon, the bears started rolling in, right? So that's the last time they do a sit that way. Well, we have harvested bears in the morning, but generally, you know, coordinating with people, we're skinning bears in the morning. We're trying to keep people fed, you know, breakfast, lunch.
Well, you're skinning bears till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning a lot of times too, and then you got to go out and it gets daylight at 5.
That's right. So we got to be real about that. You know, the expectations of people wanting to hunt a certain period of time, but we find naturally that evenings tend to be a time where we do well for harvesting bears. So.
Well, that's a lot of information that we covered here, and like I said, the sun's going down, and we're running out of the light's been horrible throughout this whole video. I hope the information's good enough that you're still with us, but anyway, once again, Scott Smith with Canadian Wilderness Outfitters. I'll put all his contact information in the description box below if you're interested in going on a great hunt in the Duck Mountain area of Manitoba. So thanks for joining me. We'll see you on the next video.